Something very underlined by Emmanuel Macron was that he was not declaring war on Bashar al-Assad. It was separate from the airstrikes. What he was saying was in 2013 there was a resolution proposed by the UN Security Council which outlawed Syrian chemical weapons. Syria had not adhered to that, and therefore Syria needed to be taught a lesson, and those chemical weapon supplies needed to be destroyed. He was questioned over why he went ahead with that airstrike with the United States and Britain without the full support of the UN Security Council. He said that was justified. It might have been illegal, but it was justified because Syria hadn't respected that UN resolution, which was voted by Russia. That was why they went in and they struck those 3 sites. That was the underlining message from Emmanuel Macron. So he was saying, no regime change, we're not trying to get rid of Bashar al-Assad, and we're not also attacking Russian forces or anybody else in that war or Iran. All we want to do is to make sure that Syria no longer uses chemical weapons. So that was what he said was the justification of those strikes at the weekend in Syria.
What about what he said about Donald Trump? Because he said he persuaded Donald Trump to keep his forces in Syria. The White House spokeswoman, Sarah Sanders, she since said that the US mission hasn't changed and Trump still wants to pull his forces out as soon as possible. OK,
there are 2 things here. The first thing is that Emmanuel Macron said that Donald Trump had been tweeting a lot about the fact he wanted to be much more aggressive in Syria. Emmanuel Macron said that we calmed Donald Trump down and said, look, you've only got to hit the chemical weapon sites. We're not going to go for regime change, which is Emmanuel Macron sort of hinted that that was what Donald Trump was moving towards. So that was the first point. The second point was France, decided to try to push Donald Trump to leave American troops in Syria for the time being. He's accepted to do that. The underlining thing is that both France wants to pull its troops out and the United States wants to pull its troops out. It's too early just yet. We need to stabilize the situation in Syria before we can do that. Donald Trump wanted to pull the troops out immediately. We've told him to leave them in there for long term. He's agreed to that. But of course, what we really want to do is to pull them out completely. France is going ahead with a peace plan, drawing up new measures to try to have some diplomatic solution to the situation in Syria. We'll know more about that later today. That is what Emmanuel Macron said is the next step now that these airstrikes are over. We want to move forward to try to work out a solution that's going to be good for everybody.
It wasn't just Syria they talked about. They also talked about other issues, for example, those strikes here in France at the moment.
Well, this interview was booked a long time before these airstrikes took place on Saturday, so it was just a coincidence that it came 2 days, a day and a half after those airstrikes had happened. Emmanuel Macron's been in power for a year. Emmanuel Macron, in his manifesto for the election, underlined all these reforms he was going to undertake if he was elected, which is what he's doing. A lot of people didn't realise, I think, when they elected Emmanuel Macron, just exactly what he was going to do, because they didn't bother to read the election manifesto. So now we have the SNCF, the state railways, we have university students, we have pensioners, we have all sorts of different sectors within French society who are unhappy with the reform programme that the president is pushing forward. The thing is that President Macron has made it clear that he is not going to go back on this reform programme for the simple reason that he was elected to do that. And if he does go back on it, his advisors are saying, well, you've only been in office for a year. If you go back on this reform programme, that's going to undermine all your chances of undertaking any more reforms in your 4 years that you have left in office, because you will ruin your chances. You will be seen as a weak president.
Finally, Philip, nearly 3 hours. It's incredibly long, isn't it? I mean, how did he actually just come across throughout the whole thing?
There was something very new in this debate. You had these 2 veteran interviewers. You had Edwy Plenel, who's the head of Mediapart, and you had Jean-Jacques Bourdin, who's an interviewer on BFM and RMC every morning, who interviews all the main political leaders in France. Edwy Plenel was defending the sort of left-wing position and asking Emmanuel Macron questions about why he's moved more toward the centre as he was in a socialist government beforehand. And Jean-Jacques Bourdin defending the sort of popular unrest in France and the questions of the average man and woman in the street. And both interviewers didn't have a tie on, and that was, I think, the first time I've ever seen that. But as you said, a very, very long interview, 2 hours 37, which is just, I don't know any other country in the world who would leave their leader on for that long. Yeah. But the underlying thing in this interview. I think the thing that came out most of all, the form was he was combative, he was aggressive, but he was keen to underline that France is taking a role in trying to sort out the situation in Syria. And that was the message, I think. Despite all the unrest in France, that was the key message that came forward.